Hi guys, welcome to part 2. We're going to pick up where we left off last week and get right back into it. For us, next question is do you stay on site or off site? We do own a condo about 10 minutes from Disney. So if we can stay there, we rent it a lot of times. So if we can stay there, we try to stay there. So like for Wine and Dine next week, we'll be staying there. But when we go back for Dopey in January, our condo's rented, so we'll actually be staying on site. So we have actually done RunDisney both ways before. We've done it actually our first race in 2014, Wine and Dine actually. We stayed on site, and using the buses, getting to the races, getting back from the races. It makes it super easy. Obviously you can't go wrong. Staying off site, in my experience, driving to Epcot has been very easy. Obviously you want to make sure if you're driving, you want to allow yourself enough time to get there. I've always made a point to leave and try to be there before 3 a.m. Because if you get there before 3 a.m., you get there before the buses start running or before the buses start delivering guests, you can actually get in, right when they start letting you in at 3 a.m. and you can usually shoot in, get in line, and you can get photos with all the characters before the buses even start coming. I would say, I think 2017, when we did Dopey, we did that. We were able to go through and get each one of the characters before all the mass guests from the resort started showing up. And then we were able to just kind of relax and do our own thing, kind of waiting and getting ready for the races. But obviously it's personal preference one way or the other. We've done both. Obviously there's pros and cons to both. I wouldn't be scared of staying off site. I wouldn't have a problem with obviously staying on site either. So the other thing is like signing up. So sometimes these races sell out really, really early. So sometimes you can kind of get, the races sold out, but it's like, oh, I want to still go. There's some travel partners that you can sign up with. One of the ones that we've actually used, Jim Stone, One with the Mouse. You can look him up. Those guys are great, Jim and Pat Stone. We actually ran our first Wine and Dine we did through Jim. And we did Princess in 2016 through Jim. The only thing with those guys, you pay a little bit of a premium, I think, but you have to buy your tickets. You have to buy your park tickets through them, and you have to rent a hotel through them. I think they have a deal now where if you're a pass holder, you don't have to buy your park tickets, but you still have to book a hotel room through them. So really, it's still a good deal, and if you want to go and then you can't buy tickets through RunDisney, obviously it's a great way to still get in. Next item on the list, Corral Placements. So if you're not used to running, or if you've never really run races before, the way RunDisney works is basically they break down people based on times, and they do corrals. I think usually somewhere between A and M, A and H, depends on the race, how big the race is. And they started doing mini waves where basically they break a corral up into, I think, 3-minute groups. So basically you're staggering groups out every 3 minutes. It lets the group kind of get going so everybody's not right on top of each other. Versus where if you run smaller races, like your local, 5K, 10K, half marathon, usually everybody all starts at once, and sometimes it can be, depending on how many people, it can be kind of jam-packed, especially if it's a short race. You never really have enough distance to be able to get the separation between all the runners that you're looking for. And in Disney, that'd be really tough. But for Disney corrals, you really want to try to run a race ahead of time to try to get a corral. Obviously at this point for Wine and Dine, if you're doing it, I was way too late. And even for Dopey, actually for marathon weekend, the cutoff was, I believe, before October. I want to say it was October 6th or 7th. But if you've got other races coming up, you know, Princess, Star Wars, you definitely want to try to get a race in under your belt. 5Ks you don't have to. I think they kind of take you at your word, you know, what your time is. But 10K, half marathon, marathon, you definitely want to try to get a Corral time. And you just think about it from a standpoint, the earlier you are up in the race, the less people are going to be in front of you for character stops. Really for character stops, if we're being quite honest. And, you know, I mean, if it's like for marathon weekend, you know, if you're trying to get through Main Street USA and still see the dream lights, you know, you want to get there before it's daylight. And if you're further back, you may not have an opportunity to get there. So that's kind of, and I've run it both ways. So for me, I'm about an hour 50 half marathoner. So usually for Disney, I'm usually like an A or B Corral, kind of depending on whatever the cutoff is. And that's, if I run my pace, there's usually very few people in front of me for character stops. Because most people at that pace, they're all running. You know, usually you run up to a character stop. It's stop, you know, 30 seconds or less, snap your picture and go. I've run with friends, run with my wife usually quite a bit. We usually run a little bit further back, C or D. And then it can be a little hit or miss. It can be 5 or 10 minute wait for some of those pictures. I ran Star Wars 5K with my son, and I didn't put in a time. We started in the last corral, and some of those wait times for pictures, you know, starting at the back were crazy. You know, I think we might have waited like half an hour plus for a few pictures. So, I mean, just kind of give you a little feel for what you can expect. As far as finishing times, I mean, Disney's very generous. You know, basically, I think the marathon is like a 17-minute mile pace. And they have people who basically wait 17 minutes from that last start, and they walk with the balloons. And as long as you can keep pace with them, you're good to go. So, and they do, I mean, they do have vans that come along, and the sweepers that'll come and pick people up. But, you know, as long as you're not usually too injured, you can usually do a pretty good job keeping up. But, and depending on the race too, if you get, you know, into Disney property, like usually a lot of the races come back in through Hollywood Studios and go up along the boardwalk and back over. And usually if you can make it in and you're in the parks by a certain time, I think you're usually good to go from that standpoint. So you don't have to usually worry too much about getting swept. Packing. So next thing will be packing for Run Disney. You know, I think it kind of depends on where you're coming from, what time of year you're going. I've run all the Walt Disney World races. So Walt Disney World Marathon January, Princess is in February, Star Wars is in April, and then Wine and Dine's in November. So with Wine and Dine coming up this next week, weather's probably going to be like in the 80s during the day. Cools at temperature at night is going to be probably upper 50s, lower 60s. So, I mean, I'm coming from upstate New York. It's been kind of cold here this weekend. It was in the 30s. We had a hard freeze the other night. Running outside, you know, we run in the 40s. So running in the 60s is still going to feel like basically running in the summer. So for me, that's going to be shorts, tech tee. I always wear a hat. I may or may not run with my Camelback. So for a marathon, I usually do. Sometimes with a half marathon, I'll wear it I won't wear the pouch for the water. I'll just wear it basically for storage, to store my phone and other miscellaneous stuff that I might need. But as far as packing, I mean, obviously you want to have, your running shoes, your running gear. Um, you do want to pack some stuff for cool weather because you just never know. Um, Especially for marathon weekend. I mean, marathon weekend. So we ran it in 2017. We ran it in 2018. 2017, the 5K and 10K days, it was really, really warm. I want to say it was like in the 80s. 2017 was the year they had the storms come through and the half marathon got canceled. So the morning of the half marathon, it was actually really nice. It was in the 70s, and then I got really cold and got down in the 30s. And it was like in the 30s that morning waiting for the marathon, and we were not prepared at all. Um, we had we had brought basically shorts. I think I might have had one pair of jeans. Um, I didn't have a sweatshirt. I didn't bring any of my cold weather running stuff. I think I had a pair of pants, and I think I had one long sleeve shirt, kind of like this. Um, we ended up, I think I wore like 3 or 4 of these shirts. My wife had brought in her winter coat. She actually ran with that, but it was getting kind of worn, and I think she ended up actually dumping it. And one of the things that Disney does do for those races is anything that gets kind of dumped off at the beginning of the race, so like sweatpants, gloves, hats, coats, they collect all that stuff, and what they do is they donate it all. So we, going forward, we try to stop and get like Salvation Army, Goodwill, and we'll roll with some extra sweatshirts, sweatpants, any cheap mittens that we can dump off, just in case, because you end up standing around a really long time waiting for these races to start. You get there, 3:30 in the morning. The races don't start till 5:30, and it is not a comfortable feeling standing around for 2+ hours shivering, especially just thinking about how much energy that you're using when you're just standing there shivering. It's just not a good time. One of the things that we found that can be like your best friend is trash bags. I mean, I know it may sound ridiculous. Having some extra Mylars. I mean, for me, I like taking Mylars, wrapping them around my waist, my lower body, and then basically what I would do is double up trash bags, so I kind of have 2 layers to kind of heat that air in between. And I was usually very, very comfortable with those. It's not super fashionable. You can actually check out my Dopey Challenge video from me and Maddie C in 2018, and you can check out our super fashionable trash bags. But they look terrible, but I'll tell you what, they were super comfortable. We were not cold in those at all. But so you really want, especially for marathon weekend, I can't stress enough. I mean, I've heard people say you basically want to pack everything with the kitchen sink, and it's really true because the weather in January, this Florida, weather, it can get cold, usually for a few weeks a year, and it does usually end up being kind of around the time that marathon weekend is. So if you're from northern areas where it can be cold, you definitely want to think about packing your cold weather running gear. So for me, winter hat, I have an Under Armour sweatshirt, I have gloves, pants, I actually have layers, like tech under gear, so I can be multiple layers if necessary. It's finding that fine line, because if you're not used to running a lot, I mean, your goal is finding that fine line between being comfortable while you're standing around at the beginning, but not being too many layers on once you start running. Because what you want to avoid is, where you're wearing too much gear and you're running and then you're just sweating a lot. Because then it can become hard to replenish those fluids, and stay safe. Because then you can run the risk of dehydration, which I have had happen. Not at a RunDisney race. But that's a story for another day. But you definitely, you want to be safe. Make sure you're staying hydrated, drinking, as much as water as you can, leading up to the race, before the race, and then trying to stay hydrated during the race. Once you start feeling thirsty, is usually it's too late. So hydrate early, hydrate often. Words of wisdom to not end up in an ambulance. So guys, that brings us to the end of part 2. We'll be back here next week to wrap things up with part 3. Thanks for watching.